Hi everyone, I wanted to take a second and put together a short little video that can show you how to use and create questions in Blackboard for exams if you have numerical or computational based questions that will allow you to have different versions of the problem without any extra work on your end, and Blackboard will actually do the grading for you. So I've picked it's a little bit of a challenging problem. You don't necessarily need to understand the chemistry or the math even that's going on, but I wanted to put a complex of enough problem here so that it might address if anybody had questions for how to do that. So let me first show you here what the question is that I chose to kind of create a Blackboard question for. So in my class, I have fundamental concepts that students have to pass. So this is a simple quiz, right or wrong, and they can take different versions of this quiz as many times as they want in order to pass it. And so typically what I've done is I've just kind of created a brand new problem. I haven't necessarily changed the numbers on this problem, but in order to make this sort of sufficient and efficient on Blackboard, what I'm going to show you how to do is take this one problem and literally create 100 different versions of it so that students can go on to Blackboard and take it and essentially never see the same problem twice. So this is a problem in chemistry that deals with kinetics. So we've got a chemical reaction here. They give us some important parameters about the problem. And then there's some useful information in terms of equations that are provided for the student. But here again is the basic prompt of the question, telling them that if they begin with a certain concentration of a reactant of this number, and then they want to know if 10 seconds of the reaction has passed, and the rate for the reaction, or the rate constant for the reaction is this number that's given here, what is the final concentration? So again, you don't need to understand too much about kinetics to just say, hey, if I start out with this much of something, I want to know how much is going to be left after this much time has passed, given a certain rate that that reaction is going to be happening by. So that's kind of all that you need to know really, is that I've got essentially a 4-variable equation, and I'm going to be choosing 3 out of the 4 variables for the student, and they've got to solve for the unknown. Now, part of what makes this a challenging problem for the student is I don't tell them which equation they need to use. They actually need to understand a little bit of chemistry to know which equation that they use. As I'll point out here, it's actually going to be this equation is the one that they need to choose. We don't need to understand that for this problem. But what I'll show you how to do is set up a problem in Blackboard so that it will solve it using this variable for literally 100 different problems that have different amounts of time, amounts of starting material, and a rate constant for the reaction. Okay, so in Blackboard, I'm going to do this again in my general chemistry lecture course here. What we want to do is go down to course tools, and then we're going to go to this tests, surveys, and pools. And I want to create a test pool. I want to create a bunch of these different questions. So not only am I going to have 100 flavors of this one question that I'm going to create, I'm actually going to create 5 different questions that each will have 100 different numerical possibilities. So in reality, there's going to be about 500 different questions that a student might randomly be given when they go in to take this quiz. So again, here I've got quizzes that I already made up, 3 different quizzes for a different kind of chemical concept. So now I'm going to be working on doing these for kinetics. So I want to edit this pool of questions. Right now there's none that are in here. So again, just to go back to show you, if you wanted to build a pool, you'd just say build a pool here, and then you'd enter in, and I'm going to have to do this for quiz 3, which will come up in a couple of weeks here. So that's what I did to create quiz 1 and quiz 2 pools. And now I'm going to edit this pool. Let me just show you here if you want. If I go in and I edit this pool, you can see here's the 3 different kinds of problems that I had here. So there's one on melting an ice sculpture, one on cooling water in a bathtub, and one on making water do a disappearing act. So again, 3 different problems that ask students to do some computations, and there's tons of different numerical possibilities, but I don't need to worry about grading any of them. Blackboard is going to do it for me. So let's go back now to our kinetics one, and this is the one where I want to make a new question. So I'm going to go up here to create a question, and I'm going to do a calculated formula question. So I'm going to click on that, and I'm going to just call this one kinetics question A. Now, I could say that it was a second order rate question or something that is more specific to what's going on, but I actually don't want to give any prompts in the question title so that they actually have an idea of how to solve it. So again, I'm going to come back over here and I'm going to copy this information that I already wrote here, and I'm going to paste it over here. You could just type this in, but since I had a lot of it written already, we can see that there's some of these that I'm going to actually have to change because they don't translate over here. Now, one thing that's specific for anybody doing anything with chemistry or anything that you might put in brackets here, anything that's put in brackets, this kind of creation of a question is going to think that you want that to be a variable. So even though this isn't scientifically what we would normally do, is put concentrations of things in these different kind of parentheses, I need to use them. Otherwise, this problem is going to think that I'm saying, this is what my variable is. This is what I want the problem to put different numerical values in for. So I needed to change these 3 here so that they're not brackets. Okay, so I have my question in here that I just copied from over there on my Microsoft Word document. Now I want to just take a second and show you guys here. Here is kind of a worked out solution for the problem. So again, here's what our problem is. And so this is the same information that you just saw there that was typed. But what I'm going to highlight is these are the 3 numerical things that I want to be variables. So I want this number of 0.2 essentially to be a variable. I want Blackboard to pick a whole bunch of different numbers for that. I want this number of the amount that I have, this concentration, to be a variable. I want the amount of time to be a variable. And then what the students are going to be solving for is the concentration that's left. So that's what I want my answer to be. So I'm going to show you how to set that up in a second, but I just kind of want to show you some other pieces here. I kind of highlighted, this is the equation that the students need to know to use to solve this problem. If I go back over here, again, there's a bunch of different equations that the students could pick from. So part of the challenge in this problem is knowing which one to choose. So I know that this is the right one to choose. This part of the equation is the part that is going to be my answer. This is actually going to be my y variable, the amount that I start with. This is going to be this rate constant, so that's going to be that numerical value. And then t is for time, that's going to be this value. So essentially, I've got a 4-variable equation that I need to solve for what is going to be my answer. So I didn't show any of the algebra here, but to solve for my answer, I would essentially take 1 over x times z plus 1 over y. And don't worry if the algebra doesn't make sense. Again, this is a video that's intended to be for people who need to use this for kind of quantitative or numerically solved problems. But this is going to be important because I'm going to need to use this piece of information in a second here. So I'm going to flip back to this in a minute, but let me enter in some of this information now in Blackboard here. So I said that I wanted this to not be set as 0.2. I want this to be my x. So what I do to indicate that I want a number to be a variable in my calculated formula question is I put whatever variable I want it to be in those brackets. And now you probably can see why we couldn't use those symbols in our regular text here, because otherwise Blackboard thinks that that's something I want to be a variable. So again, that's going to be my x. Flipping back here, you can see this is the piece that I wanted to be x. I'm going to swap out that 1.5 for y. So again, this piece I'm going to make into a variable I'm going to call y. There we go, y. And then, oh, I can see over here, I need to fix that guy too. And then I want my 10 seconds to be a number that Blackboard's going to pick. So I'm going to put that in as z. So again, going back over here, I no longer have a 10 and a 0.2 and a 1.5. I swapped those out for the variables x, y, and z. X, y, and z that I put in brackets. And again, that's why I had to get rid of the brackets around these parts of my equation here, or my prompt for my question, because I can't have anything in brackets that I'm not saying I want to be a variable. Okay, so I've set up the prompt for my question, and now I'm going to tell how we answer the question. And again, this is a relatively lengthy process, but again, this upfront time is essentially going to be creating 100 different problems for me. So flipping back here, this is essentially what I need to write in for how Blackboard is going to calculate my answer. I need to say it's going to be 1 over x times z plus 1 over y. So I'm going to first tell it that I want to have a fraction here. So I'm going to create a fraction. My numerator is going to be 1, just like I have here. And then my denominator is going to be x times z plus 1 over y. So I'm going to come down here and I'm going to say x times z. And it might be hard to see here, but these letters showed up blue, and that's kind of reminding me that those are variables. Okay, so it's going to be x times z plus 1 over y. So plus, and now I have to put another fraction in here, 1 over y. So now I've told Blackboard how to solve my variable equation, my variable question. So again, that's what I have here. We're going to have a few other pieces that we need to put in here. One of the things that we're going to have to do is tell Blackboard how willing we are to be tolerant of numerical variation. So I tell my students plus or minus 5% is okay. I'm also going to tell them that they need to have 3 significant figures and that they have to provide an answer with units. And I'll tell them that the units is going to have to be in molarity, because that's what we started with. Concentration was measured in molarity. I'm also going to have to give some parameters in terms of what I want these numbers to range from. So for example, I want my x, if I normally started out with a number that was 0.2, I'm going to say that I'm okay with that number ranging from 0.01 to 10. And again, you can use your expertise in your content area to determine what are reasonable values. My concentration, I'm going to say, is going to run from 0.01 to 1.5. And then the amount of time that's going to pass, I'm going to say, is going to run from 1 to 100 seconds. You also have to say, whether it's going to be a whole number here, like if I had a decimal of 0.1, that was going to be like 1.5 or 100.7. I'm going to have one unit, one decimal past my whole number. You can have a 0 here. So here are the decimal values I'm going to actually choose for these. And I also have to tell it how many possible sets of numbers to generate. And because I want to have 100 different flavors of this question, I'm going to choose 100. So now I'm going to have to put the rest of that information in down here. Again, I'm going to say that I'm okay with a 5% deviation in my answers. Units are going to be required. And it should pop up here in a second here. Yep. To have me put in what those units are. So the answer is going to have to be in molarity. So they're just going to have a capital M there. And let's see. Now we're going to enter in what we want our minimum and maximum values. So again, this is what I chose here. It's just not going to choose any possible numbers for X, Y, and Z. I'm going to set some upper and lower limits. So again, my minimum value here was 0.01, ranging to 10 to 2 decimal places, 0.01 to 1.5 to 2 decimal places, and then 1 to 100 with 1 decimal place. So again, you can choose whatever values you want there. Number of answer sets, I want to be 100, and I said I wanted them to answer it to 3 significant figures. So once I've set and put in all of these parameters, I can hit next. And we can see here are the different values that Blackboard has chosen for X, Y, and Z, and then it actually goes through and does all the calculations. And again, I chose 100 different possibilities, so it chooses 100 different numbers and provides those answers, and it will allow an answer plus or minus 5% of whatever the calculated value is. So one of the last things to do here is, and this is optional whether or not you want to be able to provide feedback. So I actually have some canned feedback here that I'm going to include here. So if they get the right answer, I'm just going to say, congratulations, you've passed your kinetics quiz, you're ready to go on to the next fundamentals quiz. And the next set of quizzes I'm going to make are on equilibrium. So if they do not pass, then it says, I'm sorry, you did not pass this quiz. If you feel that this is an error, please take a picture of your work and email it to Dr. Parenti. So again, it might be a situation that maybe because of how they physically entered something into Blackboard, maybe they had units, rather than writing that big M, they had, which is molarity, they had units where they wrote MOL per liter. That's still technically correct, but Blackboard might not recognize that as being correct because they wrote their units in a different way. Or for example, if this was a problem that was solving for time and the answer should have had units of seconds and they just wrote S or SEC for seconds, again, that might be something that would cause it to get tripped up with Blackboard, but it still is technically the right answer. So again, they're going to have to do some work to solve this problem. So taking a picture of the work might be something that allows them to demonstrate that they did get the correct answer. Additionally, if they're confused about how to get the right answer, if they thought they were correct and don't understand where they went wrong, I'm going to encourage them to submit a copy of that work to me via email and then kind of come to see me during our virtual office hours so that I can go over the problem with them and either let them know that, yes, you did have it correct, Blackboard kind of did not recognize that, or to highlight where they may have gone wrong. Okay. Nothing else that I'm going to really add here. If you're making a ton of questions, you can actually add some categories and keywords that can allow you to search and find things later on. I'm not going to go and do that at this point, so we'll just say submit. So after we've created our test pool that has the questions that we want, now I'm ready to actually load it in, and I don't have this available yet for students, but load it in as a quiz for them to be able to take. So under this quizzes tab that they will be able to see, I'm going to go under assessments and I'm going to say that I want to have a test. So I'm going to create a new test here. I already actually created a couple of other ones, but I haven't created this one yet. So I'm going to say create, and we're going to say quiz number 2, kinetics. If you want, you can put a little bit more of a description in here. I'm going to indicate that I want to put some helpful information for them for the quiz. And so I'm going to choose a picture. And when we were over here, remember we had indicated that this was going to be some useful information to provide for them. I didn't want them to be that to be necessarily part of the prompt. Plus, these are actually image files. They're not text files, so wasn't able to get them into the test question specifically. So I'm going to say that I want to include that helpful information here. So I'm going to browse the course because it was a piece of information that I already uploaded as a JPEG file. So I'm going to say kinetics, and I'm going to see what I can find here. So there's useful kinetics information. I'm going to put in this JPEG file here. I'm going to actually change it a little bit. It's quite large, so let's make this about 500, constrain the proportions. Let's see what that looks like now. Probably still a little bit too big, so let's make this 250. Much better. So we're going to insert this now. And so it'll have that helpful information that'll be there for them when the quiz is available. So again, general information to look here for quiz is we're going to have sort of this helpful information that will be there. Right now there's no questions yet, so I have to add a question in. So I'm going to reuse questions from a question set. And again, all my pools are listed here. So I'm going to choose this kinetics one, and it's going to show up here. Now, if I had selected those two, my previous heating and cooling curve questions would come up. But again, I'm only going to pick a question from my kinetics pool. Here's the one that we just did. So I'm going to say, let's select that, and we'll submit it. And so that question is now part of the question that we're going to have here. We can assign a specific number of points. These questions that we have are going to be worth 25 points for students here. So again, questions in the set, we can see that there's the calculated formula question that we have. We're going to say, okay. So now again, this is the test that we've created here. This is the one I want to select and submit to use. And so now we're going to enter in a lot of the same information that we normally would have here when we're administering a test. Right now, I'm not going to make this available to students because I'm not ready for them to sort of do it yet. Multiple attempts. So again, I'm going to allow unlimited attempts because I have 100 different versions that could potentially be in there. Each time they'll try it, they'll get a different version of it. I am going to set a little bit of a timer for it. They're supposed to be able to have 10 minutes or 5 minutes to do this quiz. So I'm going to set it as 15 minutes. I don't want this to be something that they can find a new set of numbers and kind of go and try to Google it and try to find out how to solve the problem. At this point, I'm not going to set a due date. I do want the test to be included in the Grade Center calculation. And again, they'll be able to take this until they pass it, and then they will get their 25 points. Let's see, show results and feedback to students after they're submitted. We're going to let them see all the answers as well as any correct or submitted. And again, because they're going to see different flavors of this, they'll be able to kind of keep retaking it until they get it right. And so then we're going to say submit. And now again, we've got this kinetics quiz. So again, if I go in here and I say that I want to begin this, kind of shows this helpful information that we have here. And so it puts in that the rate constant for the reaction is 2.11. It tells us that we begin with a certain concentration. We want to know how much is going to be left after 54.1 seconds. And we haven't done any calculations, but let's say that we're going to put in that the answer is 0.874, and we need to have units, so let's put in M. We're going to say save and submit. Click OK to review the results. So, tells us that we were wrong, that the answer actually, interestingly enough, we were just off by a factor of 1,000 there, or 100. And so we see that the answer is wrong. So if a student had worked out a solution for that and they felt like they really didn't understand why they were off by a factor of 100, they can send that to me and we can set up kind of some office hours to work through. So what I want to show you here is, again, they've got 2.11, 1.37, and then 54.1. If we say okay, and they go in and they're like, you know what, I wanna take this again. So if we say begin, we'll see that they've got a completely new problem now with completely different numbers. So if they went through and they now understand why they got the problem wrong, now that they had the right answer that was provided, maybe they realized they used the wrong equation, or maybe they figured out what went wrong, they can actually go in and now put in another answer for the problem. So I know this was kind of a long video. It was really involved. It was actually a good bit of work to kind of figure out how I was going to take what started out as literally just a paper question, a paper problem that I would submit to them in class. They take 5 minutes, literally right or wrong. I determine if the answer was right or wrong. Translating this into Blackboard took a good bit of work. I had to figure out how to make an equation. I had to set up some parameters. So a little bit of upfront work here, but once you've done that, as you hopefully could see, I literally have 100 different versions of this problem for students to work through on their own. Again, get some feedback with whether or not they're getting the right answer. And again, certainly have the opportunity to touch back with me if they're confused as to why they're not getting the right answer. So again, I'd be happy to answer any more questions individually. Just feel free, send me a message either via email or via Teams. And I'd love to help anybody who's interested in using this feature in Blackboard become proficient at it.